Welcome back, friends, to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys for another fun-filled episode talking some football. Today, the draft grades are in the books. Not that we're not going to talk about some of the guys that were just drafted in the 2025 NFL draft, but we're moving on to some more fun things, a little bit more off-season content, some more evergreen things, and we're turning back the clock here. Today, we are redrafting the 2006 NFL draft. The reason why we're doing that is because PFF data goes all the way back to 2006. And so we're going back to where it began. We've got the data starting in 2006 all the way moving forward. So we've got a lot of sample size, data and grades and everything on these players. So we're doing a little redraft here. Dalton, hope that you brushed up on the history books here for this one, because I'm excited for it. This is going to be a fun one. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Look, 20 years of PFF, going back through 20 years of data and looking at these things and old drafts and getting to redraft. And I'll tell you, it's drastically different than the one that actually occurred back then. And certainly methods have changed, and a lot of the grading was a factor in this. But I'll tell you, Trevor, I mean to ask you how well you remember 2006, because for me, I had to look back on it. I'll tell you what. This was the last year for me that I can remember, actually, that it actually is true. It's the last year that the New York Jets and the New York Mets both made the playoffs in the same year. So it was a good year, and I haven't had another one in 20 years since. So it probably could be another 20 years the way things are going, at least on one side of that. But no, good times. This was actually an era where I remember the Jets being halfway decent. So it was a good time.
I do remember. I'm very happy for you, my friend. I'm glad that this could bring back some good memories for you. I do remember this draft very fondly and impactfully, because this was the Mario Williams, Vince Young, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart draft. And so even though, a couple of those guys that I just named, maybe they're not going to make it here in this first round redraft because they didn't have the best NFL careers, they were the most prolific players in all of college football, right? And so I think that just coming off of, the incredible games that they have played over the years, certainly the Rose Bowl that everyone remembers, the game that people will point to as like a top 5 college football game of all time, with Vince Young winning the national championship for Texas there over that USC team. It was a really stacked draft class for a lot of names. Now, did a lot of those top names pan out? No, that's why doing this sort of redraft format is a lot of fun. But I do remember this draft. This was young draft fan Trev, getting into the draft here and wondering where these stars of college football were going to end up going in the NFL draft. But it is interesting to see a lot of these names, like some star. This was a star-studded draft, Dalton. And as it stands right now, we have one Hall of Famer. We have one Hall of Famer from this draft. Now, obviously, there are some All-Pros, some Pro Bowl guys that were in the first 2 rounds, but even beyond that, we've got some undrafted free agent love in this draft that I think we're going to get here in this first round. But there's a lot of fun names that we get to talk about here on today's show.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you what, they talk about it now, especially with this past draft that we just had, but this felt like when we were going through it, a trench-heavy draft too, didn't it? It's always been the theme. People talk about, now offensive lines and defensive lines are cool again. Not really. We're going through this 2006 draft, and we've got plenty of offensive linemen taken. I'm looking at some of the D linemen and going, these are some pretty darn good players, and obviously some of them went later than they should, but that's why we got to get them up here. So we've got a trench-heavy draft here again, and we'll see where it gets some of these teams. Eventually we don't ever get to see this play out, but it's interesting to see, to me, how many offensive and defensive linemen we had going through this 32.
So, just to be transparent with everybody, this was supposed to be a 3-man exercise, because myself, Dalton, and then Max, we were the ones who ended up making this. We went, pick for pick, and then we just sort of rotated there. Max couldn't join us here on the show. He is fulfilling his civic duty of jury duty. We're going to try to do his picks justice. See what it did there? By explaining these correctly. But some of these picks we made ourselves. Some of them will sort of be a little bit of a Max throwing us an alley-oop, and we'll kind of explain it to you guys then. But redrafting the 2006 NFL draft. You guys can go see the article if you want to, with a little bit more explanations, PFF numbers over at PFF.com. If you guys don't have a PFF Plus subscription, now would be a great time to get one. You get basically everything that you would want in a PFF subscription. It's the fantasy tools, it's the betting tools, it's the PFF draft guide, it's the fully unlocked mock draft simulator, which if you guys are looking at our way too early mock drafts for 2026 or anybody else's and you think there's no way this is going to happen, I can do way better than this, prove it. Go to the PFF MDS, get yourself a PFF Plus subscription, and you get 25% off right now by using the promo code DRAFT25. So now's a really great time to do it. Head on over to subscribe.pff.com and see everything that PFF has to offer, including some data that goes all the way back to 2006. Did you make the first pick, Dalton, or did you make the second pick?
Max. It was Max, and then me, and then you.
Okay, so then I'll go first. And then you could go second, so you could set up, obviously, your picks. It won't be as in line because it's just the two of us instead of the three of us. But I also wanted to mention that here on this exercise, I know that this might be confusing to some people, but we tried to go back to the draft order as it was before the draft began. So there's a lot of draft day trades that happened in actuality, but we didn't have those in place because obviously making trades during the draft, you're trading up for a certain player that's falling, that might not be there. So we tried to keep the spirit of the draft there by reverting a lot of those selections back to their original teams. Now, maybe not their original teams that had it. It was basically the teams that would have had it when the draft was beginning, not while the draft was going on. Trying to explain that correctly. I know some people might like that, some people might not, but that's the way that we wanted to do it to sort of keep the integrity of the draft here. And number one overall, and we'll tell you who was picked and then who we're making the change to here. Houston Texans. They had that number one overall pick in the 2006 NFL draft. If you remember correctly, they took Mario Williams, who felt like even in a star-studded class of Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush and Vince Young and all those guys, Mario Williams was the guy to choose, the edge rusher from NC State. I'm not taking Mario Williams, who had a fine NFL career. We will get to Mario Williams later here in this exercise, but I'm going Andrew Whitworth here, who was a second-round pick, number 55. This was Mac's selection to kick us off here at number one overall. He said in his blurb here, the Texans can fix the offensive line issues by drafting a projected Hall of Fame left tackle in Andrew Whitworth. I agree. We have one Hall of Famer currently in this draft. I think Andrew Whitworth could certainly be another one. Earned a 93.4 PFF grade across his 16 seasons, a 90-plus grade as both a pass blocker and a run blocker. Just one of the most dominant offensive tackles, consistent offensive tackles over the last 15 years, decade and a half. And so Max has him going number one overall here in this exercise. So what do you think about that, Dalton?
Agree with it. I think you mentioned it. Future Hall of Famer, I think, is entirely possible for Andrew Whitworth. And the Texans, I remember back then, especially in the days of David Carr, they couldn't pass protect for anything, right? They just had no pass protection. They were getting David Carr killed, and eventually it got a little bit better in the days of Matt Shaw, but they really needed to kickstart that process early in the days of the Houston Texans. They had a problem pass protecting, and Whitworth certainly would have fixed that.
So you're on the clock at number two. Who we got?
Number two, the New Orleans Saints, who originally took running back Reggie Bush with this pick from USC. Imagine a running back now going second overall. We got close this year with Ashton Ginty. We got Bijan Robinson go eighth. We had Zeke Elliott went fourth, and Saquon somewhere in that range. But I don't think we've had one go second since Reggie Bush here. But I'm going to switch this up.
Didn't Saquon go two?
I didn't think he went two.
I thought he went two.
Did he go two? I might be wrong on that. Hang on. Now I have to look at it.
Now we got to look it up. He did. He went two overall.
Oh, he did go second. I thought he went third or fourth. Okay, Saquon went second, and second. That's don't
you doubt Dave Gettleman?
Hey, listen,
don't ever doubt Dave Gettleman to pick a running back at number two ever again.
It's a perfect lesson because you know what? The Giants took him second, and they had nobody to block for him, and now he looks like a great second overall pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm instead going to take a player that the Saints actually took later in this draft, a player who was fantastic for them for 11 years, guard Jari Evans. They took him in the fourth round out of Bloomsburg. Over his first 4 years in the NFL, Trevor, he was the third best guard in football per our grading. That right there, third best guard in football. He had a great 11 years playing all the way through 2016. For the Saints. Then he left and went to Green Bay for a year and then retired after the 2017 season. But this guy was a big reason, literally, that Drew Brees was so well protected and so successful for all that time, setting all those records, 5,000-yard seasons, winning a Super Bowl in 2009. So I think had the Saints known he was going to be as good as he was, they probably wouldn't have waited till the fourth round to get him. I'll take him here second overall. We'll figure out running back later as we have the offensive line settled in New Orleans.
He was a stud. He was one of the highest graded players that we we had in the early 5-year sample size and then throughout his career, man. I mean, Jari Evans was awesome. And so it is funny when we do these redrafts sometimes how we give a team a player that they ended up with just later, and that now in a redraft they would have to take them in the first round or they're not going to get them. And so it's a little bit of the short end of the stick for the Saints, right? Because they got Jari Evans in the 4th, but now in order to keep him, they would have to take him at number 2 overall. But that's the sign of a great career there. The Tennessee Titans at number 3, they did end up taking Vince Young, the quarterback there, and they needed a quarterback, right? And I don't have them taking a quarterback here because there are a couple that we will talk about. One in particular, I think, here for this first round conversation, but I wouldn't take that player at number 3. Instead, I would take a player who, when Vince Young got to Tennessee, it's not like Vince Young was perfect. I'm not trying to say that he was, but these are the wide receivers that he was throwing to his rookie year. Roydell Williams, Bobby Wade, Courtney Roby, Brandon Jones, David Giddens, Drew Bennett. It was never gonna get it done. It was never gonna get it done. And instead, I'm gonna have them taking wide receiver Brandon Marshall here from UCF, another 4th round pick who was an absolute gem from this 2006 draft class. Had a 13-year career, was a 6-time Pro Bowler, 2 first-team All-Pros, 2 second-team All-Pros. Currently has the most seasons in NFL history with 100 receptions in a single year with 6. And then in his first 5 years, he earned a 90.6 overall PFF grade. He didn't have 1,000 yards in that first season, but he had 4 out of 5. The next 4 seasons were 1,000-yard seasons. I believe it was longer than that as well. So, look, the Titans needed a quarterback at the time, but Vince Young, he had his moments, but obviously was not the player in the NFL that they hoped they were drafting at number 3 overall. Brandon Marshall, not just from a short-term 5-year career rookie contract perspective, but his entire career, he was a phenomenal football player. So I'll have him go off the board here at number 3.
Absolutely. I mean, Marshall, just fantastic. And I mean, look, you already look at this. These first 3 picks are guys that went outside the top 50 in the actual draft. So these redrafts, it just shows you right there why it's so much fun. But at the 4th pick here with the New York Jets, we're going to get a player that was taken in the first round. We're going to go defensive line for the Jets, or at least Max is going to, and I have some reservations with this pick, but we're going to go with it. Max had the Jets, and he's making the pick. Haloti Ngata from Oregon, who went 12th overall in this draft. He was so good for the Baltimore Ravens for so many years on the inside, just a model of consistency, 70-plus PFF grade in each of his first 10 seasons. So, I mean, just a run defender in the middle who was so hard to move in the middle of that Baltimore defense, obviously clearing the way for linebackers Ray Lewis, Bart Scott at the time, right? And he was just so darn good for such a long time for them. But I got to be honest with you, Trev. There is a reason the Jets took 2 offensive linemen in the first round of this draft, Nick Mangold and DeBrickashaw Ferguson, and that's because Chad Pennington, obviously with the slew of injuries that he had early in his career, and taking those 2 offensive linemen was a big reason that Pennington won Comeback Player of the Year in 2006 and the Jets made the playoffs. So not as a great player. I think he's well deserving of going 4th overall here. I was a little surprised that Max didn't take Nick Mangold with this pick and leave at least one of the Jets' offensive linemen there as it was originally, even though it was the other way around. It was Ferguson first and then Mangold. But the Jets also, they had the lowest pass rush grade in the NFL the year before. Max is looking to beef up this defense with Eric Mangini coming in from New England as the head coach. So I get the logic, and Ngata's certainly deserving. If I had the pick, I might have gone offensive line, but they needed help on both sides in the trenches.
We will get to Nick Mangold. Don't worry. We will get to him very soon here in this draft. JP in the chat was talking about Jari Evans, saying a guard going this high, a little Will Campbell foreshadowing. Hey, take it easy. Take it easy. He's a tackle until he's not. All right, JP, we don't need that negative energy around here. We're trying to pump the guy up. Okay, 5 overall is the Green Bay Packers here. They originally went with A.J. Hawk, a linebacker from Ohio State. And Hawk had a long, good career for the Packers. I don't think it was worth 5 overall, but, at the time, linebacker was seen as a premium position. And so, they're looking at linebacker there. They were also looking for wide receiver, though. This was the draft that they got Greg Jennings in. And with them having a major wide receiver need, I believe this is you who made this pick here, going with Marquise Colston from Hofstra. He was a 7th rounder, almost Mr. Irrelevant, pick number 252, which is incredible. If you look at this New Orleans Saints draft, it's phenomenal. Reggie Bush at the top, he didn't end up being, the player that everyone wanted him to be. But Reggie Bush at the top, and then it's Roman Harper, it's Jari Evans, it's Rob Ninkovich in the 5th, and then you get Marquise Colston in the 7th. Pretty crazy. Finished second in offensive rookie of the year voting that first season. Ended up having, 6 1,000-yard seasons his first 7 years that he was there. And even the 2 years after that, I believe it was, what were the last 2 years of his career? I just had this up. So he had 1,000 yards in his first season, 1,200 in his second. Missed some time. He got hurt in 2008, so he only had 760 yards that year. But then 4 straight seasons of 1,000 yards again after that from 2009 to 2012. And then 2013 to 2014, he came up short, but he had 943 yards that first year in 2013, and then 902 yards in 2014. So this guy was so close to an insane run of 1,000 yards, just so consistent in that Saints offense with Sean Payton and Drew Brees and everything. And so for a team that loves that they got Greg Jennings, obviously that connection with Aaron Rodgers was fantastic. Marcus Colston's career was unbelievable, and it was just the model of consistency in what he was able to do. So you had him going at number 5 here to Green Bay in this redraft.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it, an immediate impact as a 7th-round pick, and we have to remember that big Saints turnaround in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina. Drew Brees coming off this shoulder surgery, Reggie Bush obviously 2nd overall. They took Marcus Colston in the 7th round. That's how it all of a sudden becomes such an explosive offense, right? And they made the NFC title game right away in Brees' first year, and then 3 years later, obviously winning a Super Bowl, and Colston was such a big part of that.
All right, who you got next for the 49ers at 6?
This is your pick here, and obviously a guy that I really like. He's in the Jets' Ring of Honor now. He was one of the best centers that I've ever seen. Nick Mangold to the San Francisco 49ers. Originally, this pick was Vernon Davis, the tight end from Maryland, who obviously had so many great moments and great years for the 49ers. But I don't think Mangold gets enough talk about possibly being a Hall of Famer one day. 7 Pro Bowls, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 1-time second-team All-Pro, 96.1 grade in his first 5 years. That was the highest of any player in this class. I mentioned it before. He and DeBrickashaw Ferguson just brought a level of stability to this Jets offensive line that lasted for the next 5-6 years, right? You're talking about comeback player of the year for Chad Pennington in 2006, made the playoffs, 2 AFC title game appearances in 2009 and 2010 under Rex Ryan with these 2 guys in that great offensive line they had with Alan Faneca and Brandon Moore and Damian Woody at the time. So, I mean, they were really the core. It wasn't a rebuild necessarily. The Jets were off a bad year because Pennington was hurt, but getting these 2 guys and the impact that both Ferguson and Mangold made was such a big part of that. So, and then you talk about in San Francisco where, look, they're trying to protect Alex Smith, who they just drafted the year before. They're getting all these different offensive coordinators in there every year, in part because, well, Smith isn't protected and they just don't have any consistency up front, right? You've got Alex Smith, you've got Frank Gore, you've got a good core in the backfield, but it wasn't figured out until Jim Harbaugh got there much later. Maybe if they had taken Mangold on the offensive line, things would have looked a little bit different early in Alex Smith's career and wouldn't have taken so long to get off the ground.
Yeah, some of this is going to be a little bit of a hindsight pick. I think that Nick Mangold, just one of the highest graded players that we certainly had in this exercise, one of the highest graded players that you'll find, a 96.1 overall grade in a 5-year sample size for the first 5 years of your career is nuts. That is super impactful, and I agree. He played well enough at his position to be considered a Hall of Fame type of player. The Raiders are next at number 7. I talked about how like some of these picks are a little bit of hindsight, obviously not just for the selection itself, but also maybe the butterfly effect, the ripple effect that happens after this. They took safety Michael Huff from Texas originally here at number 7 overall. This was Max's pick, and I actually do like what he did here. He took quarterback Jay Cutler, who went to the Denver Broncos. The Broncos traded up to number 12 to go get Cutler initially. As you can see on the screen there, first 5 years of his career, 75.3 overall PFF grade. But I mean, he stuck around the league for a long time. He played for over a decade, 12-year career. This is somebody who, okay, was he, a Hall of Fame type of quarterback? No, but another reason why Max ended up making this selection for the Raiders is because he said, all right, well, if you draft Jay Cutler here at 7, you don't draft Jamarcus Russell in, what was it, a year after this, 2 years after this? I can't remember exactly when it was for Jamarcus Russell, but he's like, you don't draft Jamarcus Russell at number 1 overall if that's the case. So a little bit of a butterfly effect here, but Cutler is the most worthy quarterback here in this class. the Raiders certainly needed a quarterback. I just looked it up here. The season that followed for the Raiders, Andrew Walter was the one who started the most games for them. We'll tie for the most games, I believe, with 8. Dalton, he had 3 touchdowns and 13 interceptions in this season, in this 2006 season for the Raiders. Not ideal. So, anyways, Jay Cutler going 7 overall to it says on the sheet Las Vegas. I feel like it should say Oakland.
It was supposed to be Oakland. Sorry to the people of Oakland. I changed the Rams to St. Louis, but I missed the Vegas Raiders.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. I made sure to get St. Louis Rams in there. That was the one that stuck out to me.
Okay, but you're up with Buffalo at number 8.
Buffalo at number 8. The original pick was Dante Whitner, the safety from Ohio State, who had a decent career, but I think never really took off, especially in coverage. He was a big hitter back in the day, and those big, strong safeties were guys that were taken a lot higher back then. But I'm going to go with another player from Ohio State who went in the first round. And look, the Bills, they were trying to break in J.P. Lossman as their quarterback. I thought about quarterback, but they weren't going to break another one in so soon. So I needed another weapon because their one legitimate weapon was the speedster Lee Evans, right? So let me take Santonio Holmes from Ohio State, future Super Bowl MVP, had a really good career early with the Steelers, was traded to the Jets, made a little bit of an impact during their playoff runs, and then had a big foot injury and then kind of tailed off from there. But eventually, again, Super Bowl 42 MVP. 88.4 receiving grade in his first 5 seasons. Just a dynamic route runner early in his career. Obviously, we all know the famous play at the end of that Super Bowl in Tampa against the Cardinals, winning the Super Bowl with Ben Roethlisberger. So the Bills needed another weapon. They had Lee Evans, but they needed somebody else. If they were trying to build around J.P. Lossman, which 20 years later sounds insane, but that's what they were trying to do at the time while they were figuring out their quarterback situation. Now you've got Lee Evans and Santonio Holmes, along with Willis McGahee, who were in the backfield, who feels like one of the great running backs of that generation. Sometimes we forget about with so many other, LT and Sean Alexander and Frank Gore and all those great backs we had. Willis McGahee was really good, and I probably remember him as the ultimate jet killer. It probably pains me to hear that. But now you've got Evans and Holmes on the outside, and we can see where the quarterback situation goes from there.
We got some nice wide receivers in here. Brandon Marshall, Greg Jennings, who we'll call in a second, but we haven't called his name yet. Santonio Holmes. We already talked about Marcus Colston. Like, there were some very impactful wide receivers, and obviously Santonio Holmes has one of the greatest Super Bowl moments of all time with him catching that pass in the corner of the end zone for Ben Roethlisberger. Detroit Lions now at number 9 overall, originally took Ernie Sims, the athletic linebacker from Florida State. Here in this redraft, I'm going to go with your boy, offensive guard, D'Brickashaw Ferguson from Virginia. First round pick, he went number 4 overall in this draft, so a little bit lower, but yeah, this is somebody who I think was absolutely worth it. I think that when you look at this pick here, the Lions would go 0-16 2 years after this, right? So I'm not really tempted to take anybody that is building for the short term. Like, I'm not really looking at anybody who, would have been like, oh, they had this major need at the time. The team was going downhill. You might as well have just set up the offensive line as good as you possibly could have for when you drafted Matthew Stafford in a couple of years. So when you look at Ferguson, 86.9 overall grade in the 5-year sample size that we had the first 5 years of his career. And he also earned 3 consecutive Pro Bowls from 2009 to 2011. So D'Brickashaw Ferguson, like you said, Jets legend, great offensive lineman. I'll have him going to Detroit here to hopefully set up a much better offensive line for Matthew Stafford when he goes to Detroit in a couple of years.
And the best part about Brick, and I think my favorite stat about him, Trev, he only missed 1 snap his entire career. 10 years, 10 years, over 10,000 snaps. He missed 1 snap.
Iron Man.
His entire, and the Iron Man's Iron Man just never came off the field. I mean, no matter how much he was hurting. So, I mean, you always had him just without question. If there was one constant, you had Brick out there at left tackle, missed 1 snap his entire career. And I think that wasn't until it was something crazy like 2014 or 15, something like that. He came out for 1 snap and then came right back in. So really the king of durability there in Ferguson. And you're right, eventually protecting Matthew Stafford was going to be a big key there if we got that far.
All right, Cardinals to round out the top 10. Who you got?
Cardinals at 10. We're going to get our second LSU Tiger in the top 10 here to the Cardinals. Originally, they took a quarterback. Yes, they needed a quarterback. It was Matt Leinart. didn't work out quite so well. So instead, we go D-line. We dig into the 5th round here for a player who was really good for a long time. Kyle Williams, the interior defender from LSU. I know he was with the Buffalo Bills for a long time. He was obviously really good there, but 6 Pro Bowls in his career, 81.6 career grade for Williams. And I think this is just, again, back then you're looking at the Cardinals and you're going, yeah, they need a quarterback, but they needed a lot of different things, and especially on this defense, which eventually within the next couple of years working towards that Super Bowl run that they made against the Steelers got really good. But Williams, you add him inside there to guys like Darnell Dockett was there. I think was Calais Campbell there at this point in 06? I forget sometimes. I don't.
What have you been?
It might be a year or two before Calais Campbell because he's been around forever. I forget what year his career actually started, but you're talking about, I think about guys like Carlos Dansby back then that they had just a really good defense that the Cardinals had going. Adrian Wilson, what a great player he was. So I think Kyle Williams, you add him in eventually to the pieces in this defense here in this 06 draft, and a really underrated player who was great, especially for Buffalo for a long time.
Calais Campbell was drafted in the 2nd round in 2008.
So he was there. He was there in time for that Super Bowl run. Okay.
He was there in time for the Super Bowl run. Yes. He was a young pup at that point, but yes, he would have been there for it. And Kyle Williams, just a fantastic football player from this class. Number 11, as you appropriately typed it out, the St. Louis Rams at the time. The original pick here at number 11 was Jay Cutler. Because the Denver Broncos had traded up, but that was a draft day trade. They traded up to go get Cutler, obviously. So like I said at the top of the show, we wanted to revert most of those draft picks back where it made sense because, okay, well, Cutler's not on the board. So why would we have Denver trading up to this spot if Cutler wasn't there for him because he's not even there? So instead, we gave it back to St. Louis. So they're obviously not going to take Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler's off the board anyways. I believe, did you make this pick?
I did,
You made this pick here. Yep. Yeah, okay, you made this pick here. Edge rusher Tom Bahali from Penn State. He was the number 20 overall pick in this draft, so you got him going a little bit higher here, number 11 overall. 5-time Pro Bowler, Tom Bahali, 70.0 overall grade here through the first 5 years of his career. And Tom Bahali had 89.5 sacks in his 12-year career with the Kansas City Chiefs. Really had he had an incredible run there. What was it, from 2010 to 2013? 14.5 sacks, 12 sacks, 9 sacks, 11 sacks. I mean, this dude was an absolute terror from that 4-year stretch. So obviously that's a little bit of a ways away from here, this 2006 NFL draft, but certainly the edge rusher that he became, and even early on, let's not to slouch what he was early on. 8 sacks, 7.5, 3, 8.5 before that run. So Tom Bahali was good at getting after the quarterback, and so you had him going here to St. Louis at number 11.
I'll tell you, I was just looking at it now. Trev, do you remember the days in Kansas City of Tom Bahali and Justin Houston?
Yes.
Oh man, was that fun to watch when they were on defense and they still had Derek Johnson at linebacker eventually. I'm thinking, it's a little bit later than this, but I'm thinking about they had all those guys. They had Eric Berry. Man, I'll tell you, that Chiefs team that they had Matt Castle and then eventually Alex Smith after that, what a defense they had. But Hali, it felt like for, 10 years or so was really the constant of that off of the edge. And you mentioned that peak stretch that he had. That's exactly what you're hoping for. And look, and we talk about him to this day, even coming back to the 2025 draft, another long line of Penn State edge rushers, and there's more coming. So no, Hali, he was the 20th overall pick and well deserved back then, moves up to 11th here, and the Rams needed another edge rusher at the time. So I think just a great player and somebody that's what I remember. I remember him and Justin Houston just causing nightmares down there in Kansas City.
So you're up at number 12, which is the Cleveland Browns. Technically, it was the Baltimore Ravens who ended up making this selection. This is where they took Haloti Ngata, but they only moved up one pick to do so. They were picking at 13, so a little bit of a minor pick swap here with the Browns now picking at 12. The Ravens are one pick behind them at number 13, so it doesn't necessarily ruin the integrity of where those guys were picking in actuality. But here we do have this 12th overall pick made by the Cleveland Browns. Who we taking here?
So originally, you just mentioned it, Haloti Ngata. We're going to go with a defensive lineman here. And actually, we're going to get the player who went first in this draft off the board, defensive end Mario Williams. Now, did he become the best player in this draft like he was expected at the time? Not necessarily, but still at a 72.7 PFF grade in his first 5 seasons. Made 4 Pro Bowls, two first-team All-Pros. Look, I think early in his career, you're talking about a really good pass rusher for the Houston Texans and just didn't necessarily have the longevity. But I think, too, we have to remember with this pick, the pre-draft process here, and didn't he have one of the like freakish combines of all time? Isn't that up there with?
No, I mean he was the no-brainer basically in a class that had Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Vince Young, like all these studs, college football legends. Mario Williams was still like the guy to pick at number 1 overall.
There was no chance with the level of prospect that he was, and he was still a solid player in the NFL that we could let him fall out of the first round here. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the Browns to go D-line here, to go with Mario Williams, who at the time was such a hype prospect. And you mentioned it. Those are some of the biggest names of all time in college football you just mentioned, and the fact that Williams went first ahead of him says a lot. So the Texans taking a chance on a pass rusher trying to change their defense originally. We'll go with it 12 to the Browns here.
Looking up Mario Williams combine stuff.
I remember you saying, because when the Shamar Stewart combine was coming out, everybody was like, oh, wasn't Mario and Myles Garrett in that category?
That was basically, so he was, 6'7". This is great. 6'7", 295. So that's 97th percentile, 95th percentile. He ran a 1.6 10-yard split, which is 80th percentile, and a 4.7 40-yard dash, which is 76th percentile. 40.5-inch vertical jump, 97th percentile. A 40.5-inch vertical at 6'7", 295. Like, there's no debate. There was no debate who was going to go number 1 overall in this class. 76th percentile, broad jump. Even the agility drills. All of the agility drills were over 50th percentile as well for his size, which is nuts. Bench press, he put up 35 reps in the bench press. This is 97th percentile. Yeah, there's just no way that this guy was not going number 1 overall. And like you said, did he become like the crazy Hall of Famer that a lot of people thought that he was going to be? No, but he had an 11-year career, 97.5 sacks in his career. He had 4.5 his first year, but then 14, 12, 9, 8.5, 5, because he only played in 5 games. 10.5, 13, 14.5. I mean, this dude was kind of an animal. And so I agree. Like, I don't think he should get outside of this range. I think this is the lowest, even with hindsight. This guy had a really good career, and I think the only reason why we don't speak more highly of Mario Williams is simply versus expectation of what he would have been, because people thought he was like one of the greatest football players of all time. But it was still a really damn good career for him. So, shout out Mario Williams. 13, Baltimore Ravens. This is, again, Ravens initially picked Elodie Nana. Browns here at this spot at number 13. They ended up taking edge rusher Kamarion Wimbley from Florida State. Here, the new pick for the Baltimore Ravens, though, safety Antoine Bethea. Round 6, 207 here in this draft, so a massive jump up for Antoine Bethea, who was fantastic. Ravens eventually got to Juan Landry in the 5th round of this draft, and so they needed a safety, but now instead they get Bethea to play next to Ed Reed. 3 Pro Bowls, 89.2 overall grade across 14 seasons in the NFL. Most valuable defender from the 2006 class, according to PFF's win above replacement metric. And so that's why he goes as high as he does here in this redraft, because the Ravens sort of already have that safety need anyways. He's got the accolades with the Pro Bowls, but then also to flex that wins above replacement metric, highest of any defender that we had in this class. So taking him number 13 to the Baltimore Ravens here.
Well, that's a great pick when you talk about you're trying to defend Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Ben Roethlisberger, all the quarterbacks in the AFC, which feels like the same thing we say now. Having Ed Reed and Antoine Bethea really that helps, and it doesn't it kind of feel like a little bit a couple weeks ago when we're like, hey, if you have Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks, you can defend all these quarterbacks in the AFC. So something tells me you might have even thought about this year's draft when making that. Was that you that made that pick there? I think oh no, I think that was Max that made that pick. Max must have been thinking about, you know what? They got a couple of dynamite safeties now. Let's add one into Ed Reed with Bethea there. I get it. I get it. When you're trying to defend Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and those are the guys you're trying to beat, it's tough. You got to have an elite defense, and they certainly did back then.
Okay, Philly at number 14. Who we got here?
All right, this was me here, and actually I considered for a moment leaving their original pick, Broderick Bunkley, there from Florida State. I thought about it. The Eagles needed some D-line depth. They had the 6th fewest sacks in the league in 2005, but I said, you know what? If I'm looking for a pass rusher, let me dig a little deeper in this draft. Let's go down to Louisville. Let's get Elvis Dumervil, who eventually, obviously, with the Denver Broncos and with the Baltimore Ravens was so good. 90.2 pass rush grade over the first first 9 seasons of his career, 105 and a half sacks in his career. Don't want to cheat anybody. 2-time first-team All-Pro. A little bit undersized, which is why he went later in the draft. But, man, I think a lot of teams regret passing him up, especially when you look at what he and Von Miller did. Eventually, you think about that 2015 season when Denver won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning and all the great years he had in Denver. The Eagles would have loved to have had a pass rusher like this at that point in time in 2006. They were a little bit thin there on the defensive line. Great back seven of their defense, Brian Dawkins and all those guys in the secondary. You had Dhani Jones and what's the other linebacker I'm thinking of? It's the name just left me. They had a pair of linebackers. It was Jones and I'm losing it now. You're going to have to look at it. Find it for me. But either way, they needed depth on this defensive line. And I was looking at the name yesterday, and it's killing me that I'm losing it right now. But
you're looking the Eagles you're talking about?
The Eagles in 2006.
It was Donnie Jones and Jeremiah Trotter.
Thank you, Jeremiah Trotter, because how could I possibly forget that? They have his son on the team now. I shouldn't forget that. I just blanked on it for a second there, but they needed help on the D-line. Dumerville, to me, was the best pass rusher left on the board. Had to go get him 105 sacks in his career.
I'm glad that we could save your sanity there by looking at Jeremy.
I was looking at it last night. I was going back like, wow, look, I remember Trotter and Dhani Jones there at line. I was sick. And just right now, I'm like, wait a minute, who was the other one? That's right. And Trotter really wasn't the other one. He was the star of the show.
Yeah, Dumerville, just an absolute steal in the 4th round. I mean, there's no other way to say it. So the Denver Broncos, they ended up having 2 first-round picks. Now, they were trading up in this draft to go get Jay Cutler, so that was sort of involved here. But they did pick here at number 15 because this is from the Falcons. I believe they traded the Falcons. John Abraham is how they ended up getting this pick here at number 15.
No, that was the Jets. The Jets had Abraham and had traded it later. I don't.
So how did they get this one?
This trade I don't remember, but the Jets. It was John Abraham being traded from the Jets to the Falcons that got the other first round pick.
Right. Okay. All right. So
I can find it. Let's find it.
So anyways, Broncos had this pick here at number 15. Originally took cornerback Ty Hill from Clemson. I'm going to give him Vernon Davis, coming out of Maryland. He was picked number 6 overall in this class. You talk about guys who had some of the freakiest combine performances we've ever seen. This class had Vernon Davis and it had Mario Williams, and these were 2 guys that just absolutely were not going to get out of the top 10 at the time. He did not become this sort of, I should say, like alien-like offensive weapon that I felt like he was talked about. Right, pre-draft, where it was like, okay, well, no one will ever be able to stop Vernon Davis. No one's ever going to be able to stop a tight end who could move like this. And I thought Davis had a really good career. Still deserves to be a first-round pick here, just for the overall athleticism and the type of receiver he was. But again, it wasn't like he changed the NFL. It wasn't like he changed the league. But he was a good player. He really was. And I think that he is still worthy of a top 15 selection here at number 15. I think this makes a lot of sense specifically for the Broncos, because if they're not trading up for a quarterback, their leading tight end in 2006, I looked this up, was 31-year-old Steven Alexander, who amassed just 160 receiving yards on 18 catches. That was their receiving leader at the tight end position. Davis ended up making 2 Pro Bowls. He had 2 second-team All-Pros in his career, 76.6 PFF grade through the first 5 years of his career there as well. So a really solid player, one who does have some accolades to him. Again, not the alien that just changed the NFL like some people thought that he was going to, but a really good player. And specifically for the Broncos, they really needed tight end here at this time. And so I think this pick would have made sense here, even on draft night.
So you want the crazy sequence of trades. We actually had the rare, from what I can see, I believe it's the rare double move up. All right. Okay. So Denver was originally at 29 and traded up with Atlanta to 15.
Okay.
Then from 15...
On draft night?
On draft night.
Oh, so this pick shouldn't be Denver.
So, well, no. It's weird because I don't know. It might have happened beforehand.
Maybe it should.
The timing. We got to find the timing on this. But here's the sequence and how it went. Denver was at 29. At some point, they traded up to 15 with Atlanta. Okay, and maybe that happened before draft day. I don't remember. It was 20 years ago. Then they trade with the Rams from 15 to 11 to get up there. And that's eventually when number 29 with Atlanta came around, or maybe it was before draft day. I can't remember. I think it was because the Jets were ready to take Mangold with 29 and all that. I think sometime before the draft, this all went down. and then Atlanta traded 29 to the Jets for John Abraham. So it was Denver's pick originally, but it went through the Falcons, and we'd have to look up the timing of how maybe the early parts of that trade went, but I believe the trade from 15 to 11 for Denver happened on draft night, so we'll just go with that.
This is what we get for trying to have draft integrity here. Trying to get to the bottom of things. I tried, people. I tried. And if you hate the way that we went about this, we'll do a lot of redraft shows, I think, throughout the summer because they're a lot of fun to do. If you hated the trade back method that we did here, tweet at us, leave a comment, whatever. We can leave the drafts the same. I just felt like it would be a good exercise to do that. But if it's too confusing, hey, it's too confusing. We'll learn and we'll adjust as we get to more redrafts here throughout the summer. Anyways, you're on the clock with the Miami Dolphins here at number 16.
All right, so I believe this was, Max went with the same position that they took originally in cornerback, Jason Allen from Tennessee, who didn't do a whole lot with them in his 5 years there, but we're going to get another player who actually did go in the first round just 8 spots later from South Carolina, Jonathan Joseph, who people here in Cincinnati know well at cornerback. I believe he played for Houston, also was very good down there. Top cornerback left on the board, and the Dolphins had a big need at secondary, kind of an aging secondary they had, but 90.6 PFF grade and 32 interceptions over 15 seasons in the NFL, including 2 Pro Bowls. Just a really solid player for a long time. And again, right now, I think Max was really looking for corner here. The Dolphins badly needed cornerbacks, especially if you're talking about, again, playing in a division where Tom Brady's ruling the world there, and the New England Patriots had to beef up the secondary. Jonathan Joseph from South Carolina, first-round pick the first time around, a little bit higher here.
I think this makes sense for Joseph to come off the board at this spot. I think that this is a good selection here. Did you make this? Max make this?
Max went Jonathan Joseph.
All right, never mind. Then I hate it. He can't defend himself, so I'm switching it up here.
Yeah, I know. Could you imagine Max doing a civic duty?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Unfortunately, I can because now we've got to pick up the slack for him here on the show. But he'll be back for other redrafts. I promise you guys. Before we get to number 17, Minnesota Vikings. Interesting little discussion here with them taking Chad Greenway as their original pick, but we do have a new pick for them. We don't take Chad Greenway, who I think was a good player for them. But before we get to into that whole discussion, got to talk to all the parents out there. What's your child's future success look like to you guys? That's the question that we've been asking here on this podcast for the better part of a year, because it could look like a lot of things. It could be them traveling the world, owning their own business, just owning their own house, just having a comfortable life with their family. Whatever it looks like, you can help them achieve that right now with a kids investment account for Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you guys can start investing in your child's future today, whenever you want to use it. It's not just for when they're older. You can use these funds when they have music classes when they're kids, sporting events, tutors, tuition, whatever it is. Or you could just compound those investments. And again, it could be something where, hey, we're helping them buy their first house, buy their first car, start their own business. It's all online. Setting up an account could take you as little as just 5 minutes. And then you just manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. It starts with just $20. There's no contribution limits to it. Tax advantages and funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. Plus, there's no commission fees to it, just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. You could join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. So, I don't know how Vikings fans will feel about this, because Chad Greenway, like, a legend, right? I mean, like, he was with Minnesota for a long time, really solid player for them. Felt like he was sort of a fan favorite for a long time, and I'm switching him out with wide receiver Greg Jennings, who was probably a hated rival for what him and Aaron Rodgers did to the Minnesota Vikings during the years that those two had one of the best quarterback wide receiver connections in the NFL. So Jennings from Western Michigan goes in the second round, pick 52 in this draft originally. And I think that it was a situation where they were transitioning from Brad Johnson, who was the quarterback, to Tavares Jackson. So they needed weapons in the passing game anyways. Greg Jennings was great in his NFL career. Obviously, being with Aaron Rodgers helps, but he had 3 seasons of over 1,100 yards. 8 consecutive seasons with a PFF receiving grade over 71. And this guy was consistent. He obviously had the peaks as well. So Vikings would have needed a wide receiver at the time, and probably would have liked it a lot better if Greg Jennings was wearing their colors instead of Green Bay's. So we'll have Greg Jennings go off the board here to Minnesota at number 7.
Trevor, you forget there was 7 years in Green Bay, but he did wear Minnesota's colors for 2 years in 2013 and 2014, putting up over 1,500 yards across those 2 seasons. So
did he? Okay, all right. I'm not giving him enough credit for what he was as a Minnesota Viking.
Look, he saw what Brett Favre did eventually and said, you know what, I could do that too, and he went over to Minnesota. He played there for a couple of years, So the Vikings fans are a little bit familiar with him on their side. Obviously, more so tearing him up for those 7 years in Green Bay, and won a Super Bowl obviously with Aaron Rodgers there in 2010. But no, I think if Jennings, if you didn't consider him a number 1 at that time, he was probably as good as a number 2 receiver gets. And at the very least, to get that guy with this pick, I think the Vikings would have been pretty happy with that.
Okay, 18, Dallas Cowboys.
Dallas Cowboys. So I'm sticking at the same position here. I think you actually made this pick, so we'll stay at the same position. Originally, this was Bobby Carpenter, the linebacker from Ohio State. We're going with another linebacker who was very good for a long time in Houston and now is their head coach of the Houston Texans, DeMeco Ryans from Alabama. He was the first pick of the second round, 85.6 PFF grade in the first 5 years of his career. Defensive Rookie of the Year, led the NFL in tackles in his rookie season. And look, again, there's a reason this guy is a head coach now, is because he was such a leader at middle linebacker for the Houston Texans. I think Dallas at the time, they were looking for that. They had DeMarcus Ware. They had a great pass rush, right? Solid secondary, but they were trying to fill in the middle of this defense. DeMeco Ryans really would have been the perfect captain, exactly what they were looking for in the middle of their defense. Because you remember those were the days when Ware was in his prime. That Dallas defense was not fun to play against at all. And if they could have just like now, if they could have just stopped the run a little bit better, we might have seen him go further than they did at the time. Obviously, Tony Romo was emerging at quarterback. So DeMeco Ryans the pick here at 18. Trev, I think you did a solid job with that one.
Yeah, I mean, they're just taking the same position that they needed at the time. They're just taking a player who was better at it. And so I think that that was a pretty easy one there for the Cowboys. Number 19 was the Los Angeles Chargers. San Diego Chargers at the time.
Oh, we missed that one too. All right. Well, listen, we're going to work on it. This was the first of what, 20 or however many. I don't know if we're going to do all 20, but we're going to do several of these. We're going to work on it. We don't want to disrespect the people of San Diego. The San Diego Chargers. Is this the first time we had the same player picked? I think it is.
I think so, yeah. The original pick here was Antonio Cromartie from Florida State, originally picked in the first round at number 19 overall. And would you look at that? The new pick is Antonio Cromartie. So it was a situation where they absolutely needed cornerback help here. Cromartie was He was a hot and cold type of a corner, right? I think that Antonio Cromartie embodied what it means to play the cornerback position. And that means, like, sometimes you were just going to lose. Like, sometimes you were going to have... His career coverage PFF grade was a 68.0. And yet this is somebody who was a first-team All-Pro in 2007, had 4 Pro Bowls, and he had an elite 90.8 coverage grade in that one year that he was a first-team All-Pro. So, like, this guy truly embodies, like, when you are winning, when you are hot as a corner, like, you are so incredibly impactful. You grade incredibly well, but then there's the other side of the coin where it's just a very up and down position naturally. So, for the peaks that Cromartie was able to give, we're going to keep him here with the San Diego Chargers at number 19 overall. But, we do admit that it was an up and down, a little bit of a roller coaster ride for the Antonio Cromartie experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. Trust me, I know that too, but it was a lot of fun to watch him when the Chargers traded him to the Jets, and to watch him and Darrelle Revis side by side in that Rex Ryan defense playing all that man-to-man coverage. Cromartie was certainly a lot of fun to watch. And don't forget, Trevor, I believe, if I remember right, the longest play in NFL history. Is that right? 109-yard return for a touchdown off of I believe, a field goal that was short. I think that's right. So Cromartie, look, doesn't get any longer than 109 yards, so he's always going to have the longest play in NFL history too.
Yeah, he had 10 interceptions. It is funny. He had 10 interceptions that 2007 season.
Good player.
That's so many. 31 interceptions throughout the course of his NFL career. A ball hawk, a great athlete, 6'2", 210. I mean, he's built the way that you want corners to be built too. So yeah, there he remains the pick here at 19 for the San Diego Chargers. Okay, Kansas City Chiefs are up here at number 20. Who you got here?
So we get to the fun part of the draft here where it's, okay, this team made a great pick in Tamba Hali, but now he went ahead of this spot, so I have to find just a new alternative for what they needed. And I started looking at the offensive line. Inside, they were set with guys like Will Shields, right, and Brian Waters at guard. They were fantastic on the interior, but there was kind of this looming situation on their offensive line with Willie Rofe at left tackle, possibly retiring, and he didn't retire until a couple months after the draft. They also kind of needed some help at right tackle. So offensive tackle was something I was looking at for the Chiefs. I went with Eric Winston, originally the third round pick from Miami, who had a really good career, I should say, with the Houston Texans. 87.9 overall grade, 91 run blocking grade during his first 7 seasons, 6 with Houston. And actually, this was a player who was with the Chiefs for 1 year. I believe it was in 2012 or 2013. But, maybe not a first-team All-Pro type of best tackle in the league guy, but you're talking about a solid right tackle in the league for 7 to 8 years. I think that's somebody the Chiefs could have used at the time as they were figuring out their quarterback situation as well. They were kind of getting into the back end of Trent Green, and maybe eventually, I think it was 2009, eventually they got to Matt Castle, but they were in transition with their quarterback situation and their offensive tackle situation. I went with the offensive lineman, Eric Winston.
Yeah, I think this is a solid pick for them. I do. I think this is a good pick for them in the redraft here. Getting him in the third round, he was a really solid football player. No question about that. 21 New England Patriots. They went with running back Lawrence Maroney here as their original pick. So this is my pick here when we were doing this exercise.
I was so mad at you for this too. I was so mad.
I bet you were. They could have gone with Maurice Jones-Drew, who's in this class. Could have gone with D'Angelo Williams, who was also in this class. 2 very good running backs, 2 running backs that were better than Lawrence Maroney. So if they wanted to stick at the running back train, they could have done that. But instead, I gave Bill Belichick the lone, surefire guy who's already in Canton, Hall of Famer, in Devin Hester. I gave Bill Belichick Devin Hester because Bill Belichick can figure out defense. And he had Tom Brady on the offensive side of the ball. But what could have been the X factor for them over the years and maybe winning even more Super Bowls would have been the edge that Devin Hester would have been able to bring the New England Patriots in punt and kick return duties. Best return man of all time. I don't think there's any question about that. 4-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro. He had 4 kick returns and 7 punt returns for touchdown in his first 2 seasons. When he was on the field as a not kick returner, 68.1 overall grade through his first 5 seasons. So obviously this is somebody who he wasn't used a lot on the offensive side of the ball as a wide receiver, but just as a punt returner, absolutely still worth that first round pick as the only Hall of Famer as it stands today here from this class. So Belichick gets Devin Hester here in this redraft.
I was so mad when I saw you make that pick because I have the Bears at 26, and that's exactly what I would have done just for the symmetry of it, because they would not have made the Super Bowl. They may not have been close without Devin Hester in some of the games that he won them. There's always the famous Monday Night Football game against the Cardinals that season when he returned 2 kicks for touchdowns in the same game. They are who we thought they were, that whole game. But I was so mad when you made that pick just because of that. I wanted to take him to the Bears at 26. And of course, you have Bill Belichick taking a special teamer in the first round because who else would do it?
That's true. That is very true. Bill would be the guy to pull the trigger on it anyways. Okay, Denver Broncos, I think, at number 22 here. We have them with 2 first-round picks here. What's happening here at number 22 for Denver?
So are we going – this was the pick where we had our mix-up. Are we going with the new one or the old one?
Yes, no, we're going with the new one.
The new one. Okay, all right. So originally – I didn't make this pick, so I'm not worried about it. This one's on Max. Originally, we ended up with
Max just catching strays.
Absolutely. Look, he didn't see. They already drafted Vernon Davis. They didn't need Mercedes Lewis. So we'll go with a safety instead. We're going to go with DeJuan Landry, who you mentioned earlier, Antoine Bethea was taken instead of Landry for the Ravens, at safety earlier, but Landry eventually pairs with Ed Reed as the strong safety and had a solid career for himself as well, right? Played with the Ravens, also played with the Jets. I think went over with the Jets was way later. He was with the Ravens the first 5 years of his career. And look, the one thing you can see, really good run defender. You want that box safety? You've got DeJuan Landry, 80-plus run defense grade, Trev, in 7 of his 9 seasons. That's what it was. He was brought in to be the complement to Baltimore, to Ed Reed as the free safety, Landry as the box safety. Denver takes him here. We had a kind of a roundabout way of getting there with this, but no, certainly when you add him into this defense that I believe still had Champ Bailey in that secondary, you're getting the enforcer. And I think it shows, again, this was an era when those big enforcer, run-stopping, strong safeties were taken a lot earlier, right? And Landry is a good example of that. You even think about, a year like this year, a guy like Nicky Manwari, and there was, that type of player 20 years ago would have been taken in the top 15, no question. Landry originally went in the first round here. He's going to get here into number 22 to Denver.
This is also an era where safeties just exclusively did bicep curls in the gym.
Yep.
Like every single safety in this era just had the most giant arms you've ever seen. And I think we need to get back to that, honestly. Just straight curls in the gym. It's
a passing league, Trev. I mean, you look at some of the safeties that went off to Michael Huff. Dante Whitner was a huge hitter, same way, just out there trying to kill people out there with Buffalo and eventually San Francisco. Landry, that type of enforcer, even eventually Cam Chancellor didn't go high in the draft, but that was something that was still very much valued back in the day, and now it doesn't seem quite as much, especially with all the penalties that are called on every single hit in the passing game too. So just kind of shows you what era we're looking at here and what we were looking at in 06.
Yeah, Roman Harper, who I actually know now in real life, still jacked. Like Sage still just doing curls like 3 times a week, I've got to think. So,
sure.
The enforcers, the bicep curl workout, that's how you got to the NFL, and that's how you made it work here. 23 overall, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They took guard Gavin Joseph, who was good for them. But Donald Penn, I think, is the new pick here. And it's funny, he also was a Buccaneer as well. He was a guy who started for them for a while. Didn't miss a game for Tampa Bay from 2007 to 2013. Had a 91.5 PFF grade from 2007 to 2017. He earned a 91.5 PFF grade. So obviously, like, the consistency that goes into it, it's not like, oh my gosh, he was like Trent Williams every single year. But when you are consistently good, it sort of compounds, and obviously you get more credit for being somebody who plays well for a long time. So he had just an elite 10-year career there within that span of time. Yeah, so Donald Penn, really good pick for them. An eventual Buccaneer, wasn't originally a Buccaneer. Went undrafted in this draft, actually, out of Utah State. Cut by the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, like you said, made his way down to Tampa. But I think if it's a redraft format, they would have loved to have Donald Penn no matter what. So here, knowing what we know now, you got to take him in the first round to get him. So Donald Penn, the offensive tackle, who went undrafted, now going number 23 to the Buccaneers here in this redraft.
It sure makes you wonder how a guy like that just falls completely out of the draft. I mean, if it's combine stuff, if just no one noticed him at Utah State, but boy, the career that he had between the Bucs and the Raiders, and certainly was it John Gruden at the time that brought him over with the Raiders when Derek Carr had that big year. I mean, you could argue he had a couple of his best seasons out there in Oakland. So no, I mean, Penn, look, I think it's just like I had with the Jari Evans one earlier. Had the Bucs known that was coming, yeah, he wouldn't have gone undrafted for sure, and maybe he would have gone in the first round. So fun one there, the Bucs getting a guy that they're very familiar with. 24 here to Cincinnati, and it feels like a conversation that we have plenty when you talk about, okay, the Bengals need pass protection. At the time, it was Carson Palmer. Nowadays, it's Joe Burrow. Another case where Jonathan Joseph, the player they took originally, already went, so we had to find you had to find another solution here. You had the Bengals pick. How about a second player from Hofstra going in the first round? They don't even have a football program anymore. I believe they shut down in 2009. Willie Colon, early in his career, right tackle, went to the Jets, eventually played guard towards the latter part of his career. But, now you've got Andrew Whitworth, who doesn't go because they got him in the second round of this draft, and he went first overall originally. Now that we have in this redraft, they're still looking for offensive line help. Whether he plays on the left or the right side will be determined. Originally a fourth-round pick, but Cologne, really good at right tackle, 87.3 PFF grade in his first 5 seasons, played 10 years in the NFL. Eventually, as he got older, switched inside to guard. So just a solid offensive lineman for the Bengals, which it feels like apparently for the last 20 years is what they've been looking for, and they continue searching for. for him. But in this case, they couldn't get Whitworth in the second round like they originally had, so they'll take Willie Colon here at 24.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you kind of need this one knowing that you don't have Whitworth, who went a lot earlier here in this one. But I think that Cologne is somebody who would be a very solid pick here in a redraft. New York Giants at number 25. Giants ended up trading this pick to the Steelers, who took Santonio Holmes here at number 25. And so, yeah, not a bad selection there for them. But we gave this back to the New York Giants. Redraft, we'll go with Dante Whitner here, who was the number 8 overall pick in this draft. Whitner was highly regarded coming out of Ohio State. He could be somebody who, look, he made 2 Pro Bowls in his career, played 11 seasons, had an elite run defense grade. He was probably never the coverage defender that you wanted him to be, but it was a different era. I think being an enforcer over the middle, being a great run defender, I mean, like, that carried a lot of value. And so even though not redrafting him in the top 10, like where he was originally taken, he should still be a first-round pick, I think, from this group. And for what he was as an elite run defender over an 11-year career, to me, that's still somebody that would be worthy of this selection here. So it's something that can absolutely fuel, because it's the Giants who are making this pick, so could absolutely fuel those Super Bowl runs that they had in 2007 and 2011 as well, with Whitner being a part of those teams if this would have happened here in this redraft format. So I'll go with Dante Whitner again. Not a top 10 pick, but somebody who's still a first rounder in my opinion.
All right, 26 is actually the Chicago Bears. Now, this was a draft night trade where the Buffalo Bills had traded up from 42 to get to this pick to take defensive tackle John McCargo, who played exactly 1,000 snaps over 6 years in the NFL, only had 3 career sacks. So instead, we go back to the original order. We had the Bears at 26. And funny enough, I was looking through, and I'll tell you what, this Bears team was so stacked, especially on defense. I was digging through, like, what do they actually need? And then I said, you know what? Let me just take the player that they took at 42. I'll take him here at 26. Safety Daniel Manning from Abilene Christian. 5 solid years with the Bears. The best one was actually his rookie year with an 80.3 PFF grade. Another piece of that great defense that they had. Obviously, Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs. I thought about corner, but then they had Charles Tillman and Nathan Vasher. I didn't feel the need to do that. Maybe an edge player, but I just couldn't find one that I was like, let me go in the first round. And so, I just took the player that they went with at 42 once they traded back with Buffalo. Daniel Manning, if you're comfortable taking him at 42, probably comfortable enough to take him at 26 if you like him enough. So I went with the original pick. Maybe you would have gone with this next guy that you had to Carolina, but for the sake of symmetry, I went with it. I went with the same pick. It was their first draft pick. It just wasn't made until the second round with the trade down. Now I make it at 26.
Yeah, this next pick that you referenced is the Carolina Panthers sitting here at number 27. They took D'Angelo Williams, who Williams was a big part of that 1-2 punch out of the backfield with Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams, which gave them a lot of success. Played 11 years in the league. For Carolina specifically, like, he was somebody who, he had a 1,500-yard rushing season. I think he had, 18 touchdowns in one season. He had some great numbers, D'Angelo Williams did. So could have easily been the pick here again for Carolina because of what he meant to that team and how successful he was in a handful of those seasons that he was there. But I ended up going with Roman Harper, who, funny enough, ended up in Carolina. He actually started with the New Orleans Saints as part of that stacked draft class that we mentioned earlier in the show, but the Panthers' 2 starting safeties in 2006, Mike Minter, Sean Williams, both were no longer starters a year later. Like, those guys were both gone, so they had a major safety need anyways. Harper ended up making 2 Pro Bowls in his career, had a 72.4 PFF grade through the first 5 years of his career. And like I said, he played for New Orleans, and then he eventually went to the Carolina Panthers later in his career. But it's funny, I have gotten the chance to talk with Roman about sort of his playing days in his career. And he says one of the things he really wished that he could do in his career was play on the same team as Steve Smith Sr. And Steve Smith Sr. was on the Carolina Panthers during this era. If Harper would have been drafted by Carolina, him and Steve Smith would have been on the same team for a long time. And the reason he said that is because him and Steve Smith Sr. hated each other. And they had a rivalry for so long when Harper was in New Orleans and Steve Smith was with the Carolina Panthers. I mean, there were late hits, there were punches thrown. Like, these two dudes hated each other. But as their careers went on and they realized they, had to come to grips, was like this dude's actually good. Like, the guy that I'm going up against, he said a mutual respect of competition really formed between those two dudes. And now, funny enough, they're friends in real life. But he says, he's like, I would have loved to play with Smitty when he was in Carolina, sort of at his peak, and I was at my peak. And so they never really got the chance to do that. But here, I'm making that dream a reality. I'm making them teammates here because I feel like it would have been a good pick for Carolina.
Absolutely love that. I mean, and you're talking at the time, just to keep reinforcing defense. And you mentioned it, another one of those bicep safeties that's just going to hit people over the middle.
Yep.
You got to love it. That's 2006 for you. Absolutely.
He's gonna hit people, and he's gonna hit bicep curls after the game because you got to get the finishing pump in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can't walk away just without doing anything. No, absolutely not.
No.
All right, 28 here. Jacksonville Jaguars. We're going with actually the guy who was their second-round pick in this draft. From the same school as their original first-round pick, Mercedes Lewis at tight end from UCLA. Maurice Jones-Drew. We're getting another running back in the first round here. And look, we know the impact that Jones-Drew had on this team. All-time leader in the franchise for rushing touchdowns, over 8,000 rushing yards. Second behind Fred Taylor, who originally he was playing alongside. This was kind of the back end of Fred Taylor's career, and MJD was the change-up to that. What was it, 5'7", just the bowling ball that he was, running through people at that size. 3 Pro Bowls, 2-time first-team All-Pro. I think he returned some kicks, too, early in his career. He kind of was the change up back. Plus, I thought he was returning kicks at one point. I could be wrong on that. But you know what? He was so darn good for them as a second-round pick. I get it. I think Max made this pick, and you talk about moving him around up just to make sure you get him. I mean, no, actually, I might be wrong on that. He might not have returned kicks. I thought he might have early in his career. I could be wrong.
No, he did.
Did he? I'm just not seeing it here in our numbers. So
no, he has from 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, he had 31 kickoff returns, 13 and 4.
Oh, did we not have kick return data back in 06? I might have to look into that. We'll see. But either way, I was like, I feel like I remembered him returning kicks too. But you know,
he barely returned punts. He had 2 kick return for a touchdoon in his first 2 years.
See, I don't. Just because it's been 20 years doesn't mean I forget this.
You know,
he was really at the time, especially as a changeup originally to Fred Taylor, who was kind of that veteran power back, right? You talk about a 3-way threat, rushing, receiving, and returning kicks. Maurice Jones-Drew was the whole package, man, for a while in Jacksonville.
Yeah, no, MJD's great. Drake is yelling at us in the in the chat saying that MJD should have been long gone off the board by number 28. But hey, Jacksonville. We couldn't take him away from Jacksonville. Had to make sure that he was a Jacksonville Jaguar here. New York Jets. Sorry, there's nothing I can do about this one, Dalton. They took Nick Mangold here at number 29. Nick Mangold obviously well off the board here as the number 6 overall pick here in this redraft. I'm going to give him offensive tackle Marcus McNeil, who was the second-round pick in this draft, went number 50 overall. I think that they still would have needed to address the offensive line, right? Because they got DeBrickashaw Ferguson and they got Nick Mangold. You can't replace the Nick Mangold pick, but McNeil had 6 solid seasons with the Chargers, ended up retiring due to injury, but he finished his career with a 78.7 pass blocking grade. I thought he was a solid offensive tackle. And I can't have the Jets get out of the first round after taking DeBrickashaw Ferguson and Nick Mangold and not give them some sort of an offensive lineman, a guy who was at least pretty stable for them before, again, his career was cut short due to injury. So this was a massive draft for the Jets, and I think subbing out Nick Mangold and DeBrickashaw Ferguson, who were both top 10 selections here in this redraft, is a little tough, but McNeil at least gives them the short term of what they were looking for during that rookie contract.
Yeah, just a team desperate for pass protection with the situation with Chad Pennington. I still have nightmares of all the Chad Pennington injuries because there were a lot of them back in the day, and that's really what killed several seasons back then. But, you got to get an offensive. They had to get something here on the offensive line, so McNeil is the pick. Number 30, the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I thought this was an interesting one. So the original pick was the running back Joseph Adai from LSU, who played a very big part in the Colts winning the Super Bowl in 2006. Doing a running back, but we're going to switch it to a guy that you mentioned earlier that you passed on in Carolina, D'Angelo Williams out of Memphis. He was originally picked number 27 in this draft to the Panthers. Here goes number 30 to the Colts. His career was just a little bit longer. Adai probably got off to a better start in his first couple of seasons, especially the way 06 in his rookie year went. Him and Dominic Rhodes in that backfield complimenting Peyton Manning and all the weapons in the passing game. But you go with Williams for the longevity. His career lasted a little bit longer. He was effective for a little bit longer. could have really helped them. Maybe you think about having a guy like DeAngelo Williams in 2009 when they had that perfect season going for a while and then they coasted into the Super Bowl but couldn't beat the Saints. Maybe a little more balance on that team would have helped. But go with a running back, DeAngelo Williams, instead of Joseph Adai here, hoping that he makes the same impact early on as Adai did in getting the Colts to that Super Bowl victory in 2006.
Yeah, and I think that he could have, and I agree. I think that this is the right pick here. 31's the Seattle Seahawks. They went with cornerback Kelly Jennings from Miami, Florida. I'm going to have them stick with the same position here. I'm going to go with Brent Grimes, who went undrafted out of D2 Shippensburg University. Brent Grimes, you want to talk about a guy who had an up-and-down career. I mean, he had some crazy seasons. He had great years with the Falcons, with the Dolphins, with the Bucks. He had an elite 91.3 coverage grade in his career. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler, had 33 career interceptions. Grimes, I remember he was with the Bucks when I started my career in this industry as a beat reporter for Pewter Report. And Grimes was he was one of the most unique athletes I've ever seen in my life. Like even well beyond 30 years old. I mean, he was probably the most athletic player on the Buccaneers roster. The way that the explosiveness that this dude had in his body was unbelievable. The hops that he had, the first step explosiveness, the overall speed, the ball skills that he had. He was a little undersized, just overall height and weight, but just such an incredibly unique football player and somebody who there's a reason why he had standout seasons for 3 different teams. It's because the talent was shining through with Brent Grimes. So undrafted in this draft, but we're getting him in the first round. I think that Seattle would have loved this dude as a ball hawk in their secondary.
Absolutely agree. Was it with the Bucs or with the Dolphins where he made one of the craziest one-handed interceptions that we've ever seen? I don't know. It was I can't remember who it was with, but I remember there being some just ridiculous one-handed pick that was the craziest thing. One of the 5 craziest plays I've ever seen in my life. He just the highlight reel with Grimes was nuts.
There is a 2-minute compilation YouTube video of Brent Grimes athletic interceptions. Yeah, okay, the Dolphins one's the very first one that comes up, the one-handed one that he picks off in the end zone.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I mean, you've got just I'm rolling through them right now. These are just the hops that this guy has are unbelievable. I'm just going through these highlights right now, and he is crazy, man. Just an insane athlete. So I had to get him in the first round here to Seattle.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it. So, I mean, you're talking about a good player. I'm actually with the Pittsburgh, is it Pittsburgh, right, at 32 here? Yes,
at 32,
fresh off a Super Bowl victory in, I think that was the one in Detroit, right? Jerome Bettis' last game over the Seahawks. So, I'm going cornerback here also, and I was between 2 guys. Originally this pick was an edge player, Matthias Kiwanuka from Boston College. I was between either Cortland Finnegan or Tremont Williams out of Louisiana Tech. I went with the latter, so we finished this draft with 2 undrafted cornerbacks who were really good athletes. Tremont Williams, obviously several really good years with the Packers, including an 83 coverage grade in their Super Bowl winning 2010 season. In his career, I didn't realize his numbers were this crazy. 38, if you include the postseason, 38 interceptions and 111 pass breakups in his career. The Packers found a real diamond in the rough. He gave them 8 really good years. He didn't play in 2006, but from 2007 to 2014, he was really good. Then he played with a handful of other teams before going back to the Packers again and finally retiring after the 2020 season. I believe he tried to move to safety and inside a little bit late in his career, but I'll go with Tremont Williams. Look, this Steelers team coming fresh off that Super Bowl victory, they were stacked. I actually had a really hard time with this pick. When you look at their defense was arguably the best in football. They already had a quarterback. They were stacked up front. They had receivers. They had Santonio Holmes emerge alongside Hines Ward, Antoine Randall. So I just went with building the depth in the secondary. We took Tremont Williams from Louisiana Tech to the Steelers at 32.
I love it. Okay, so who didn't we get in here? Rob Ninkovich, we didn't get here in the
Cortland Finnegan. Cortland Finnegan was a tough one for me. That was one I almost took at 32 for sure.
Steven Gostkowski is in this class. He went in the 4th round. Now, I wasn't going to draft him in the first round, but he's worth shouting out here.
I'm sure if you didn't get the other special teamer to New England, you probably would have. So
I absolutely could have.
I do.
Absolutely.
There is part of me that wonders. if we should have got Reggie Bush in here.
And that's the thing. Like, Reggie was somebody that, but I'm not taking Reggie over D'Angelo Williams or Maurice Jones-Drew.
No, that's reasonable. I think were those the only two backs that we had? I think so.
Joseph Adai was the one who went in the first round for the Colts, and like I would have thought about Reggie Bush in the same conversation as Joseph Adai, but I wouldn't have picked him over those two guys.
I'm seeing if there's any other names here, because obviously you take heat for quarterback needy teams not taking quarterbacks, but I'm just seeing if there's any other names here that
Owen Daniels, the tight end, was in this class.
That's a good call. Owen Daniels at tight end.
Could have got him in here.
Eventually, we didn't get Mercedes Lewis in there, who is to this day still playing. He's the one player from this class still playing, right? I think he signed another $2 million contract with the Bears. I think you mentioned Chad Greenway was another one.
Yep.
DeQuell Jackson from the Browns, linebacker for the Browns. What a great player he was.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, there's a handful of names there. I'm looking. Oh, wow. Remember Lendale White going in the second round alongside?
Of course I do. I loved Lendale White. Of those two dudes, Reggie Bush and Lendale White, Lendale White had one of the greatest running back aesthetics you will ever see in your life when he was at USC. Just the playmaker face mask, dark visor, wearing 21, a little elbow sweatbands. Dude,
I'm just looking here. Domata Peko.
Yep.
We didn't get him in. Darren College, tackle for the Packers. Ninkovich, you mentioned. Yeah, Stephen Tulloch, did he go? No, he went later. He was a good player for Tennessee. So, there's some fun ones, especially on defense, but you open up those spots because these redrafts are going to be weird with certain years, especially like this, where it's the quarterback class. Cutler was decent for a while, and the rest of it was a disaster. And there's actually a lot of years when you go back and look at quarterback classes, we're going to have some years. We might have a couple of years where we don't get a first-round quarterback.
Yeah. And that, you know what? That's not that surprising because a lot of times you got to draft these guys early. Delaney Walker's also in this class, but Delaney Walker didn't break out until he was almost 10 years in the league with Tennessee. He had 4 phenomenal seasons with Tennessee from 2014 to 2017, but most of his career from 2006 to 2014, he really didn't do too much, but there we go. Those are a handful of names. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this exercise. We're going to do a lot more of these throughout the off season. So go make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. We would love for you to like the video as well. That would really help us out. And go get a PFF Plus subscription. Use the promo code DRAFT25. You can get 25% off basically everything. It's the fully unlocked mock draft simulator. You get the draft guide. So if you want to see more information about the guys that your team just drafted, go get the draft guide if you have a PFF sub. And then when we get to the season, all the premium stats like we talked about here on the show, the fantasy football tools, the betting tools as well. But we'll get to more. We'll do a lot more of these redrafts. I think they're a lot of fun. Not doing a redraft next. We got a couple more topics that we're getting to later in the week. Wednesday at 10 a.m. is our next show. We would love to see you guys there. So for Dalton Wasserman, for Max Chadwick and jury duty, salute, civic duty, for everybody behind the glass, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching the PFF NFL show. We will see you guys on Wednesday.